The story of Cain and Abel in our first reading today, it's the first and probably the most famous of all the stories of sibling rivalry that we ever hear of. Two brothers who eventually, one comes to blows and does much worse to the other than anyone would like. Here at the beginning in Genesis, and we've been reading Genesis now, last week, and we'll be reading Genesis again for a few more weeks. Last week we heard of the fall of humanity, that great wounding that sin has done to us, that great turning away that sin has inflicted on us. And in these days, in Genesis, we see the results of that, relationships breaking down, siblings fighting, getting to the point of killing one another. But we also hear, too, of the sin in the heart and in the thought, in the word and in the mind before it ever gets to actions. The picture in Genesis, in many ways, here today is quite bleak when we hear what Cain does to this innocent man, to this brother of his, to Abel. What are we to do with this? How do we see this? What is our resolution to this? Well, the only resolution, of course, can be found in Christ. The great teachers and fathers and saints of the early church saw in the image of Abel a prefigurement, a foreshadowing of Christ, the ultimate innocent one who would die at the hands of others. But in Christ's case, that's to bring about our reconciliation. The wound that we see in Cain, that he inflicts and murders his brother Abel, that wound is only healed, is only restored in the person of Christ. That's what the great fathers and saints of the early church saw. And indeed, in our first Eucharistic prayer, the oldest of our Eucharistic prayers, it speaks of Abel's sacrifice. It speaks of Abel as a foreshadowing of Jesus Christ. And that blood which is spilled on the ground, which is poured out and which cries out to heaven, is that not a foreshadowing of the blood of the new covenant that we consecrate at the Mass, the blood of Christ poured out to heal us and to forgive us? But also here in that first reading, we hear the voice of God the Father calling out to Cain, calling out and searching for humanity. It's not that God doesn't know where we are. It's not that God thinks, oh, what have I done with those human beings? It's God calling out to us. It's God inviting us to come back. It's God showing us, because we need to see that sometimes. It's God showing us his care for us, his desire to come to meet us. All of that is foreshadowed in these terrible events of Genesis that we hear of brother killing brother. Christ is the only one who can heal us. The blood poured out by Cain of Abel is fulfilled and healed in the blood of the new covenant, the blood of Christ. And the Lord who calls and searches for Cain and Abel is the same Lord who comes now and searches for each of us, desiring to heal us, desiring to bring us back to himself. What was begun in the wounding and the killing is healed and restored in Christ. Today we are reminded that everything in the Old Testament points to its fulfillment in Jesus. All of our wounds, all of our searching, all of our brokenness is healed only in the truly innocent one who has lived and who has died and who has risen again for us. Today in Abel we see the vision of Jesus. Today in his blood we see the wounding that can only be healed by the innocent one, Christ. Today as we move forward, as the chalice is consecrated on the altar, we think of the love that God has had for us in pouring out his own blood to heal us and to save us. Let's turn now to that Lord who has given everything for us, that he might come and search and find us and heal us with his grace.